Did you know insecurities are actually learned behaviors? So, my name is Elvira, and I'm actually a licensed mental health therapist. And I thought that I would combine this video as both a vulnerability video of how I've grown as a person, but also as a therapist, how I can help you outgrow your insecurities. We're told everybody has insecurities, and that is true. But what we're not told is that insecurities are actually just learned behaviors that we pick up as we grow up. A lot of the times, we just internalize them instead of outgrowing them and outlearning them. So, the same way you learn insecurities, you can train, or as I like to say, trick your brain into outlearning them and actually learning to like the parts of you that you thought you hated. In this video, I'm actually going to get pretty vulnerable with you guys. I'm going to talk about my insecurities that I've had growing up. I am 31 years old, so there's been a lot. So I'm only going to be talking about a handful of them. And I'm going to be talking to you about them in two forms: the ones that I have unlearned or gotten over, and the ones that I'm still working on, because it's not always easy to outgrow your insecurity. Because I'm going to do that for you with my own insecurities, I'm basically going to be teaching you how to do it for yourself. And I'm not going to lie, it is not easy and it takes time, which is why I still have quite a few that I haven't outgrown. But before I get into that, I am going to have you pause this video because I want you to get a piece of paper, get a pen or a pencil, and I want you to write down your own insecurities. And I want you to make a list at the top, and then I want you to think about which insecurities of these you consider them to be learned or innate. So innate would be like the ones that you're born with. What insecurities were you born with? And what insecurities did you learn as you grew up? Go ahead, pause the video now. The point of this little exercise is because now that you have hopefully written down the insecurities and separated them into two columns, I want you to go back and rethink the ones that you considered innate, if any, as ones that you actually did learn. Because no child is born hating certain parts of themselves or feeling insecure about certain areas of themselves. And I do want to explain that a lot of the times what we learn is not always based on direct conversation or direct teaching where somebody's telling you, like, this is how it is. But a lot of the times it is based on the behavior that has been modeled for us. So if you have an insecurity about, say, your body, what your body looks like, what your weight looks like, and nobody has ever made a comment about your body, then I want you to think about how the people around you make comments about their own bodies. And I say that because my body is one of the insecurities I'm going to be talking about, but that is one that I have been taught in two different ways. I have been taught in the way of like people directly telling me things to my face that say, well, your body is not beautiful, or you're not the right shape, or you're not the right size. But I've also witnessed literally everybody, and I mean both male and female, of all of the adults in my life hate their bodies my entire life, to the point where majority of my family members have gotten plastic surgery. And that is just the reality of what I was surrounded by. I was surrounded by people that hated their bodies, who were always on a diet, who were always exercising, who were always making comments on people's weights. And that is exactly what my brain picked up since I was a baby. So, we're going to jump right in to talking about what insecurities I have been able to outgrow, how, and what insecurities I'm still working on. We'll talk about a little bit later. Insecurities that I have had in the past that I have now outgrown now that I'm 31 include music, books, interests, my voice, and my face. Now, I'm going to explain what these mean a little bit more in more detail, because you might be thinking to yourself, what do you mean you're insecure about music or books or your interest? First of all, books have been a hyperfixation for me since I could read. I have had a book in my hand since the moment I learned how to read. And that was just one of those things that I always carried around with me that I did not realize the rest of society did not view as something cool. So, whenever somebody saw me with books at school, made comments about the fact that I'm always reading, you know, for a long time, it was something that I was just like internalizing, like, okay, people maybe don't read as much as I do, or people think that I'm a nerd, or people think I'm a little weird until eighth grade. And it's funny because there are certain things that have been told to me, and I'm sure to you as well, that you never think about again. Never ever think about again. But then there are certain things that just stick with you. And when it comes to books, books were like my absolute favorite thing growing up. And I remember for Christmas in eighth grade asking my mom that all I wanted was books. That's literally all I wanted. I had a whole set list, a whole list that I gave her of series that I really wanted to read. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of money. And anybody who loves books, any book girlies or book men, or anybody who's dating a book person will know books are extremely expensive. They are costly things. So, thought to myself, like, there's no way I'm going to get all of these books. There's no way. I'm just like going to dream big. And that was literally one of the best Christmases of my life. To this day, I remember that Christmas because I got basically every single book I wanted. And I was so happy about it. I was sharing it with my other friend who also loved to read. And one of the boys in my class came up and he started spreading this rumor like, oh, all she got for Christmas was books. Ha ha ha. And they started like joking about it. Mind you, that wasn't true. It wasn't all that I got for Christmas, which was even more shocking because, again, books are expensive. And that was all I wanted. So, like, my mom throwing in a couple extra things was a surprise. But also, why is that funny? I loved books. And to be honest, if somebody were to say that to me right now, I would be like, yeah, that is all I got for Christmas. And guess what? That's all I wanted. And I would defend that. And I have definitely outgrown my insecurity around books. But after that, I never, ever, ever spoke about books out loud again in school. Any book that I was reading, I still read, don't get me wrong, but I would hide them in my backpack. I would hide them in my desk. I wouldn't let anybody see that I was reading because at that point, it seemed like books were not something that I was supposed to be into. And that was very difficult for me. Music is an interesting one also because I did not really pick up, I know this is going to sound wild, but I did not really pick up listening to music until high school. My own music. Like, obviously, I knew what music was, and I have heard music before, like whatever my parents were listening to. But me, myself, listening to music up until high school was like not a thing. To be fair, I didn't, again, like I said, we didn't have a lot of money. So it's not like I had CD players. I didn't, which, yes, I'm that old. I didn't have a CD player. I didn't have an iPod for a really long time after they came out. My flip phone didn't really have music on there. So it's like I didn't have anything that could expose me to music, to be honest. We didn't have cable. It was like that serious. So it was just me and my books up until high school when I then was exposed to music because I then was able to get like a better phone, a more modern phone. I also started to meet a lot of people in high school that music was their thing. So they started to introduce me to people, to their artists, their music, what they liked. And then I started to explore what I liked. And what I liked was just so different than what everybody else liked that became an insecurity. So it became an insecurity one. I did not tell anybody. Actually, this is probably the first time I have ever shared that music was not a part of my life until high school, until I was a teenager. That on its own used to be an insecurity to me. I used to pretend I knew artists. I used to pretend I knew who people were talking about. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that artist. Yeah, I love their music, even though I was not exposed to it. So that was another thing. And interests, just in general, interests were for a very long time something that I didn't share with people because it felt like people didn't really care. So traveling was like one of my top interests ever, especially after I went to Europe for the first time when I was 16, while I was about to be 16. It was the kind of like all I wanted to talk about was like things that interested me. My books, my shows, my movies, my music that interested me, but in general that kind of felt embarrassing because they were so different from what everybody around me was listening to. I was in high school listening to Hannah Montana and the Cheetah Girls, and obsessed with these musicals. Meanwhile, the people around me were like into rap and into these all these other artists. So it was just an insecurity of mine that built, and I just didn't share. I would just sit there and pretend that I listened to the same stuff. It was just what it was. The way that I outgrew those three things genuinely was through time, with like the comments people made and what people were saying around me, and me pretending that I, didn't like anything different, came with like this whole people pleasing thing where I wanted to fit in. It wasn't until much later in life that I started to meet people that actually has similar interests to me, and they started to model the behavior to me that it was okay to like different things. So the moment that like I started to find out like, oh, you listen to K-pop? That is great. I love K-pop. Or, oh, you watch novelas, or you watch K-dramas, or you love musicals. Like, then when I started to see people starting to be themselves, I started to adopt that in myself too. I was like, well, then it's okay for me to be myself. And it wasn't like I wanted to start liking the things that they like. There's this one specific person who actually was himself so hard that he inspired me to be like, well, I could just be myself. Like, who cares? To this day, I admire him for that. He's always been himself. He was a co-worker of mine for a really long time, and he's always been himself and still is. Still is. We don't work together anymore because I left the company, but I have him on social media. So I see that he's still doing his interest, and it doesn't matter. He does not care what anybody thinks about him doing all of these different things. He's just himself, and just watching other people be themselves helped me become myself, basically. That's how I grew those three things, and that was hard. I don't think was comfortable. Like, the first time I started sharing the things that I enjoy with people, I was probably in my late 20s, like maybe 28, 29. Because even in grad school, it was like grad school was like a whole other level of clicky. So even in grad school, it was like, well, I can't tell these people that I like to read romance. They're gonna think it's so weird. So I didn't really start until way later. And now in my 30s, I feel like this is the most free and secure I've been of like what my interests are. Like, I don't care to tell people that I like to read manga, because they'll be, or that I like to collect things, right? Like, even if they think it's childish, like, I don't care. That's your problem, not mine. The next two things that are insecurities I have outgrown in a different way. So those things I outgrew by watching other people be themselves, and it gave me the confidence to be myself. These other two things I also outgrew in my late 20s, which I think it helps, that my brain is not fully developed as well, was my voice and my face. My voice, I hated hearing my own voice for such a long time. Like, even if it was just an echo, it was just like a recording, somebody was filming near me, I was zipped up. I did not want anybody to hear my voice for such a long time. And part of that, I think it's because I have always been a curious person and a talker. So asking questions and just talking about things has always come easily to me. And I think it's funny because I do have a joke with me and my family members that I could probably talk to a tree if it talked back. I can talk to anyone. It doesn't even matter if we have similar interests or not. I will find something to talk to you about as long as you talk back. People that don't talk back is a huge pet peeve to me. It just like gets under my skin. I do find that not everybody wants to have a conversation with me. And that was very clear to me growing up when people would shut me down. So because I wanted to talk to everybody, and because I wanted to be curious and ask questions and get involved, but I come from a culture where children should be seen and not heard. So immediately it was one of those things where it was like you were shut down, and you're just like, you couldn't be talking. You shouldn't be asking questions. I think that might have fueled the reason why I hated my voice so much. In addition to the fact that for a really long time, I thought my voice was really manly. And that bothered me because I've never really been feminine in general, traditionally feminine, but I just didn't have a feminine voice bothered me. The way that I outgrew that insecurity of hating my voice was actually by listening to it, believe it or not. So in grad school, we had to film ourselves over and over and over and over again. And we had to film ourselves pretending. So I'm a therapist. We had to film ourselves pretending we were doing therapy with each other, so we had a partner, a classmate, and we would film and then just record it. Then I had to go home and listen to it and type out every little thing that we said word for word. Now, if you have ever transcribed anything, you know that 5 minutes of video can take up to an hour or longer of transcription. So I would sit there and I would listen to my own voice for hours on end and just doing that over and over and over and over again really was the only way that I got used to my voice. I got older and I feel like once you get older and your brain fully develops and then you just learn so much more, there's so much more to life, it gets easier. And then I think the other part of it was my face. I used to hate my face to the point where sometimes that insecurity like still pops in. Very rarely, but it'll still pop in. And the reason why I hated my face is because I used to get told this statement all the time since I was little. I've been told, you would be so much prettier if you lost weight, if you were skinnier. You would have such a pretty face if you were skinny. And that, that falls into a different insecurity that I have not outgrown. But obviously, that part made me feel like, whoa, am I ugly? Does nobody want to see my face? Also made it really hard where I didn't want to take pictures. When FaceTime came around, forget it. I did not want to be on FaceTime with anybody. I refused. When it came down to pushing out of like that insecurity was actually when I started when I started social media, seeing my face. I'm here filming this video, but I have to sit here and edit this video later on. And I basically have to sit here and stare at my face for hours sometimes. I've gotten a lot faster at editing, but I still have to sit here and stare at my face for hours. And I post on TikTok and Instagram daily. And I'm daily showing my face and editing my face. And I just staring at my face nonstop and putting my face out there. At first, it was really, really hard. Eventually, with time, I did get over it. Another thing that actually really helped with just getting more used to taking pictures in general was when I lost my grandmother in, I believe, 2009. Then a couple of years later, this one's still hard for me. My dad's best friend passed away. And he was like a second father to me. And I just don't have any pictures with him. I really don't have many pictures with my grandma, especially older. I have like more when I was like really little with my grandma. And realizing that is one of the reasons where I just started taking pictures no matter what. Even if I didn't like how I looked, I started taking pictures, especially because I then started to travel. I knew this video was going to be hard for me to film in general, but I didn't think I was going to be crying. Anyways, I don't have any pictures with them. And then after I started to travel, I just wanted to make sure that I had as many pictures as I possibly could from all of the places that I have been. With time led to me liking my face. And now there's one thing that I always remind myself. So now, because whenever people see me with my siblings, I'm constantly asked, like, are you guys twins? And people are always like, oh, your parents just copy pasted all of you guys. So I'm constantly being compared to my siblings. And I think my siblings are one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen in my life. Like, I genuinely think that they belong on magazine covers. They're so pretty. So when people compare me, when I'm having a hard time, and I remember that people compare me to them, I'm like, well, would I ever tell them what I think about myself, or like what I tell myself? And the answer is no, because I genuinely believe that they are one of the most beautiful people to walk on this planet. Genuinely. So that also is a good thought that has helped me basically unlearn the hatred that I had for my face. I have four insecurities that I'm still actively working on. And these are just like some of the major ones. Like, sometimes there's other insecurities that pop up. Some of the major ones that I have not outgrown is hair. So I'm Latina, which means I'm really hairy. It's just is the reality. I grow a mustache. I grow a beard, unfortunately, to a certain extent, not like a man. We're just really hairy. I'm really hairy on my arms, which I don't care about the hair on my arms anymore, even though I used to get made fun of all the time for it. Legs are really hairy if I let them be. It's just how it is. Latinas are just like that. This is one of those insecurities that I never ever even questioned until seventh grade, when a boy, in fact, the boy I had a crush on at the time, came up to me and was like, "Why are you so hairy?" Never in my life had I thought about that. Never in my life had I even thought about hair like being a problem or anything like that. And from that day on, hair has been my major, probably one of my biggest insecurities, if not the biggest. Like, these other ones are like, insecurities, but I don't care about them as much as hair. My legs had to be covered at all. My mom didn't allow me to shave at that point. My legs had to be covered. I wore stockings even in 90-degree weather. It would be hot. I would be wearing my stockings. I would be wearing pants. And to this day, it has been the insecurity I have yet been able to outgrow. And I don't know what it is about hair, because everybody has hair, everybody has body hair. For some reason, it is the one that I have not been able to outgrow. Another one that is a big one, which I kind of mentioned before, is my weight. And it's funny because when I was young, I was not very big. I was just like I wasn't skinny, but I also wasn't huge. So people making comments about my weight when I was a child, or even into a teenager, like sometimes I'll look at my pictures as a teenager and I'm like, this, and I don't have a lot of pictures as a teenager, again, because of the face. I used to hate myself, what I looked like. But the little pictures that I have, I'm like, this is who you guys were calling fat? Like, are we serious right now? And again, weight is just one of those things that right now, that's one of those insecurities that are like really come and go. I don't really care about it that often, to be honest with you. It's like not as bad as the hair. The hair insecurity is my worst one. I do want to take a minute to talk about this one a little bit more, because I recently watched the America's Next Top Model documentary. And I do want to point out, I mentioned earlier that everybody around me, like, not only were people making comments about my weight, but everybody around me was modeling the fact that they hated their bodies. I don't think I know a single person in my entire life who was just perfectly comfortable with their body. Every single person, like, everybody was on diets. I think all of my cousins, everybody grew up the same way as me, hating their bodies, because just everybody, all of our aunts and uncles, all of the adults were just actively just unhealthily obsessed with their weight. Also, everything that we are exposed to in the media feeds into this. So if weight or body image is one of your insecurities, which is like one of the most common insecurities, I think, ever, it is one of the biggest learned behaviors we have. Because even watching America's Next Top Model, these girls were far from being even chubby, and they were belittled and called the most horrible things on that show. These were things that we were watching growing up while our brain was developing. That is something that is a learned behavior that really an entire society of maybe even the entire world, I don't know. I think it varies per cultures, but I think it is way too common, to be honest. Another insecurity I have is going to sound kind of silly, but it is pronunciation and basically the way that I speak. So this one was a two-parter, and half of it I outgrew. So should have been in the first part of the ones that I outgrew, which is the way that I speak. I have never, so I learned to speak through reading. Everything I have ever learned has been through reading, except slang. And because I learned through reading, I didn't know slang. So whenever I spoke with people my whole life, I used to be told, like, you speak too proper. Like, why do you talk like that? Is what people used to say all the time. Like, why do you talk like that? And I always used to be confused. And it was just the way that I spoke was definitely not common communication. I spoke the way that I wrote. You speak the way people don't usually speak the way that they write. They speak the way that they speak, and then they write the way that they write. Have always spoken the way that I write. I have always spoken the way that I read. So the way other people write. Because of that, I was never familiar with slang. And it was something I had to learn, like how to adapt. And this is something that like help now I know that is one of the reasons why it helps me. I'm able to talk to pretty much anybody now is because I had to learn how to adapt to the way that people were speaking to me. And this was actually a main issue when I started practicing as a therapist one-on-one with clients, is that you can't speak to a client that has never graduated high school with vocabulary of PhD or like grad school level, basically. And that was so tough for me because I now had to learn to adapt. I had to figure out what level of speech is the person in front of me at, and I had to adapt to it. I had to learn slang. I had to learn how to pick up slang really fast, and I had to learn how to very quickly, within the first couple of sentences, assess the level of speech that the person in front of me was at, because I had to match them at that. And this has always been tough for me. And I outgrew that insecurity of like the way that I speak in terms of not speaking slang. Like, I don't care. If people are like, you speak too proper now, is yeah, it is what it is. I learned how to speak through reading. So I speak how I read, I speak how I write. However, because of just empathy and general being a human, I do adjust the way that I speak to everybody I talk to. So just like I don't speak to a child the same way I speak to an adult, I don't speak to two adults the same way. Every single person has their own, like I assess every single person to their own level and I adapt, because that's just something that I have picked up to do, because the way that I speak, I know not everybody talks the same way as me. And at first, I was doing that because I was insecure, because I was worried people would think, well, there's this girl, why is she talking like that? Or I was worried people would think that I'm being judgmental of them for them not speaking a certain way, which was another thing that people would say all the time, like, you think you're better than me. And I'm like, no, I really don't. It's just this is the only way I know how to speak. So at first it was because of that, but then now I do it because I want to make sure that whoever I'm speaking to is comfortable, is not only just comfortable with me, with talking to me, but also like understanding what I'm saying. I don't find it helpful when there's like such a huge gap of understanding. So I do adjust for that reason. But what I have not outgrown is my insecurities with pronunciation. Because I'm bilingual and because I learned how to speak basically each language, I learned by reading. So all of the words that I know in English has been through reading. When you learn something through reading, you don't learn how to say it. I mean, especially English, you guys know that there are certain words that you read, that you see on the page, like night, for example. Night starts with a K. Night, not night of nighttime, but night of knight in shining armor starts with a K. I wouldn't know how to pronounce night if I never heard it. So that's something that a lot of people make fun of me. To this day, people mention that and make fun of me, and it's one of my biggest insecurities. It's probably second to hair. Is how I pronounce things. And when people bring it up, it like immediately my whole face flushes. I feel my face flush and I know I'm blushing because it is like such a big insecurity, and it happens in all languages. Like it happens to me in English and it happens to me in Spanish, because in Spanish is the same thing. I'll struggle with pronouncing things and then I'll get corrected. And instead of being like, oh, that's how you say it, I'll get embarrassed because I didn't know how to say it right. And it's one of the reasons why I struggle with speaking French, even though I've been learning French now for 16 years. I struggle speaking it out loud because I already, two languages that I'm fluent in, I struggle with pronunciation. Now imagine me throwing into the mix this whole other new language. However, the way to overcome that insecurity is just to do it. Is just to keep pronouncing things. And I know it because it was how I overcame the insecurity of my voice. So these are the ways that I have outgrown different insecurities. And these were the insecurities that I still am working on outgrowing. Some of the ways that I am working on outgrowing, for example, the insecurity of weight. So pronunciation, I'm just practicing, just speaking. So I will, whenever I travel, I will do my best to speak in the language of the country I'm in, where I'm forcing myself to put myself out there and pronounce things that I just don't know. Now, for the weight, I think that that one is more for me specifically. I have to focus more on the logistics and the factual statements of this. So I'm a certain weight and my body type is a certain body type, but if I focus on that too much, I know I will fall into the trap of everything that I've learned with my family. So basically, the way that I'm outgrowing my weight insecurity is by not focusing on it. So I focus on day to day healthy eating, movement for my body, and just sleeping properly. I'm not overeating, I'm not undereating, I'm not necessarily like going out of my way to be on a diet, but I'm also eating as healthy as I possibly can just to take care of my body. So I focus on taking care of my body instead of what my body looks like, of what the weight is. And I obviously follow up with my doctor and make sure that everything is fine. The way that I deal with that insecurity is by just not thinking about it. Because if I focus too much on what my body looks like when I film a video, then I'm like, oh my God, it looks so horrible, and all of these negative thinking comes out. But if I just look at my body and I'm like, that body took me to Japan, I focus more on gratitude instead of what it looks like. So now I want you to go back to your list and I want you to take time to think about the ways that I mentioned that I outgrew certain insecurities, and figure out how you can maybe use these strategies or come up with your own to outgrow your own insecurities. And I do want to mention an app really quick, which is the Finch app. And it is an app that it's for free. I use it for free. There is a pro version that I don't use, but this app has been really, really helpful in helping me focus on areas that I want to grow in. On this app, I have, drink water. I have certain exercises I want to make sure I'm doing every day. I have affirmations, which, believe it or not, affirmations are really, really helpful in retraining your brain to think about certain things. So if you're thinking that, oh, my face is not what I want it to look like, trick your brain or gaslight yourself into thinking, wow, I'm actually the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Through time, even if you don't believe it at first, through time it does work. So you can add these goals into your Finch, and it basically is you keeping a little bird alive and doing well. And it is one of my favorite apps right now because it does help me focus on what areas of growth I want to grow in. And it keeps me accountable because, my Finch can't go on her little adventures or grow or decorate her house if I'm not doing my goals for the day. So I just wanted to share that app. Like, I think is a great starter app if you are trying to outgrow insecurities. So say you have a weight insecurity and you want to use my strategy of focusing more on what your body does for you and how to keep yourself healthy instead of what you look like, then maybe you can put certain health goals in there that can help you focus more on that instead of what size you are. I hope that this video was helpful. I find that is a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. If you made it to the end, I am rooting for you. I hope that we can continue to outgrow these insecurities. And let me know if you want more videos like this, more from a mental health perspective from a therapist, in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you for the next video.